Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Molina Asthana. I'm a commercial lawyer with my own practice and currently the Vice President of the Law Institute of Victoria. I'm also a commissioner for the AFL Southeast Commission, a director on the Board of Gymnastics Victoria, and a member of the Football Federation of Victoria Tribunal. I'm also the founder of the organization Multicultural Women in Sport, which aims to empower women, migrant women from multicultural backgrounds through sport. And my organization is the program partner for today. Most recently, I've also been appointed to the advisory board of the Center for Sports and Entertainment Law at the Gujarat National Law University, as well as on the advisory of Prarambika Sports Academy in Bihar, established by an Australian alumni. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where we have all joined today. For me, it is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and to any other elders who may be present with us today. Our topic for today is sports diplomacy, pitching for a stronger Australia-India relationship. I'm often asked what we mean by sports diplomacy. So on a simplistic level, sports diplomacy means using a nation's sporting excellence in ways that enhance the influence and reputation and advance the national interest of the country. This can be done through the international representation in sport or using sport to build linkages with other jurisdictions, to maximize trade, tourism, and investment opportunities, or to strengthen communities. Australia has a sports diplomacy policy, as do other countries. For the longest time, Australia and India's sporting relationship was represented by the first C in the 3 Cs of cricket, Commonwealth, and curry. And that reflected the limited efforts in the sports diplomacy space as well. This has changed over time. Australia has always been a sporting nation, but more recently, it has become evident that India's sporting ecosystem is on the verge of exponential growth, and its interest in sport has moved beyond cricket, hockey, and soccer to non-traditional areas like esports and fantasy sport, fitness, and sports technology. The Olympics just finished, and I don't know about you, but I was literally glued to my TV for the 2 weeks. It was amazing, of course, to see Australia excel, which it always does, but also to see some of the Indian athletes shining and to hear of their backgrounds and the wonderful stories that have shaped their sporting careers. As golf was a big surprise. Aditi Ashok, who came fourth, is a very promising golfer, and Neeraj Chopra captured every Indian's heart by winning the gold medal in javelin, the second individual to win gold for India and the first in athletics. So for those who don't know, he was coached by Australian coach late Gary Calvert and created history during the World Junior Championships under his training. So the potential is there, and I think with the right coaching, funding, facilities, and pathways, there's every possibility for India to emerge as a major sporting nation, which it rightfully should be with the population and the demographic that it has. This changing sporting landscape presents meaningful commercial and non-commercial engagement opportunities for both countries. The current geopolitical climate and India's recent Olympic success lends further support for sports diplomacy efforts to be directed towards India. Australia's India engagement strategy also emphasizes that supporting India's sports agenda can help Australia entrench positive relationships with Indian governments and businesses. But it also clarifies that many of the obvious means of engagement are not commercial. They lie in government dialogue and policy support or developmental and community relationship building. Such engagement is valuable and brings broader benefits. The role of sports diplomacy as a vehicle for advocacy on gender equality, women's empowerment, and disability inclusion, and for engaging Australia's Indian diaspora is also highlighted in the strategy. My own passion lies in seeing more women engaged in sport, especially with gender equality a priority for both countries. Also, if we want to build on the diaspora-focused connections between Australia and India, then I believe sports diplomacy should be right on top of the list. We already have examples of sports diplomacy being used to further these objectives. The Sports Analytics World Series, which is an Australian initiative, is also hosted in India. And in 2018, where I also spoke, it was linked with the sports trade mission from Victoria. This has led to a number of sports tech companies in both countries forming relationship with sporting bodies, governments, not-for-profits, and other organizations. Through these connections, I'm now working on an initiative with an Indian sports tech company to highlight stories of women of diverse backgrounds playing a variety of sport here in Australia. Projects relating to underprivileged children, people with disabilities and disadvantages, and women in India have been undertaken by various sporting organizations and codes like RecLink, AFL, hockey, and cricket. I have helped out at AFL as well as rec plank footy tournaments in India, which had local kids from underprivileged backgrounds participating. The summit hosted around the T20s Women's World Cup last year, which seems like an eternity ago, was also a brilliant example of sports diplomacy. In this panel, while building on our common passion for cricket, we aim to delve deeper into these other avenues to strengthen Australia's engagement with through sport and facilitate that. And to facilitate that, we have a fantastic panel who are already involved in some of these initiatives. The format for today will be that each panelist will talk for about 5 minutes, followed by a moderated Q&A by myself, and then we will open it up for audience questions for the last 15 minutes or so. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we will get to them at the end. Before I invite the panelists to speak, I want to formally introduce them, though most of you would already be very familiar with them. Simon Toefl is an Australian cricket umpire who is a former member of the ICC Elite Umpires panel. He won a record 5 consecutive ICC Umpire of the Year awards between 2004 and 8, and is generally considered to be one of the best umpires in the world. He officiated in 74 test matches and won 74 one-day internationals between 1999 and 2012. He also recently won the Australia-India Business and Community Awards, which I can very happily say that I nominated him for, and that was for his contribution towards the sporting relationship between Australia and India. We also have on the panel Lisa Stalker, an all-rounder who retired from international cricket in 2013 and has been part of 4 successful World Cup victories, with the last one being held in India. During her time with the Australian team, she was vice captain from 2006 to 2008 and had the privilege for a few matches captaining her country. Lisa is the first player in women's cricket history to have scored over 1,000 runs and taken 100 wickets. Off the field, Lisa is still heavily involved in cricket as a commentator around the world, plus one of Channel 7's commentary crew. She also holds a number of positions as an independent director on the Federation of International Cricketers Association board member of the Australian Cricketers Association board, a member of the ICC Women's Committee as a players representative, and just recently made a council member for the Sports Advisory Diplomacy Council. The next panel speaker is Brad Rouse. He has been a central figure in Melbourne City Football Club's leadership since the club was founded as Melbourne Heart in 2010. Brad joined the club in 2009 as a director of commercial and operations and has played an integral role in transforming the club from a startup business into a successful and sustainable organization, an anchor club of City Football Group. Since taking on the CEO role in 2018, Brad has helped take the club to 2 back-to-back grand finals and winning both the A-League Premier's Plate and Premiership title in the 2021 season. This was also on the back of the most successful women's team in the W League history. Before joining Melbourne City, Brad held senior commercial and marketing roles in AFL with both Geelong and Melbourne football clubs. Last but not the least, Harini Rana is a sports media and management professional. She's India's 2nd female sports editor. She has reported from 14 countries and has covered 4 World Cups, 2 Olympic Games, amongst others. Recently, Harini has been selected by the ICC for Future Leaders program. She's an Indian in the list of 40 girls picked from 29 countries who have potential to be future leaders in world cricket. Here's a little glimpse of her Australia Connect before she speaks. Can we have the video, please?
Belief, passion, sport. 3 words that define me, that motivate me. Sport has given me life lessons and inspired me to continue my hustle. It has made me understand life as, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same. That's me, Harini Rana.
I believe you're the only female Indian cricket reporter here.
Yes.
In a press gang of 120.
That's true.
What's it like?
It's been a wonderful experience covering cricket in Australia. You know, every cricket journalist sort of dreams about covering a series down under, and I would be hoping India would begin and break that MCG jinx. But what empowers me is my passion for sports. Sports has been a constant in my life, only its role has changed since I was a student to being a professional. It has empowered me in different ways. It has given me confidence, freedom, contributed immensely in building my personality, amplified my voice, and taught me life lessons. I so wish to see many more girls take up sport and experience the empowerment that I have.
Thank you. Over to you, Harini.
Thank you, Molina, for a warm welcome, and Simon for playing that video out. And a very good afternoon to everybody from India, to all the panelists and the attendees. And I would just like to begin by thanking Australia India Institute, the government authorities for inviting us alongside such accomplished names in the field of sport. Two of whom I've had the privilege to interview. Simon, I've troubled him quite a few times when he's been officiating in big matches, and Lisa, whenever I've had the privilege to interview her on the sidelines of World Cup or any other events in Australia. And Brad, lovely to connect with you. And, just going back, obviously we saw that video. So I have a special Australia Connect, and when I got a call to actually be on this panel, I didn't even look at my calendar. I was like, okay, I need to do this because it's such a powerful subject. And I personally have experienced sort of this magic of what this tool sport diplomacy can do. And as a journalist and as an individual, having reported from our 13 plus countries, we all sort of have known and experienced how sport can be universal. It's a phenomenon that transcends boundaries, languages, and culture. And, Mona, when she gave an introduction, she spoke about, the Olympic Games that we all sort of experience right now. Different countries, different medal tallies, but everybody was united. And in this pandemic, that's something that all of us sort of were feeling exhilarated. And how it can harness a far deeper connect between people and two nations, between the countries. That's what sport diplomacy can do. That's what sport has done. And, I would want to share my experience because, through my stories, through my interviews, and through certain initiatives that my work has led me to in media and sport, I was appointed, you saw that video, I was appointed as a brand ambassador by the US Consulate General. I was invited by Hillary Clinton's foundation, Vital Voices, for a sports mentoring program, and that was with the former PGA Vice President Donna Oranda. But I think one of the most memorable sport diplomacy program for me was the one which was mentioned earlier, which was Global Victoria's Business for Women in Sport. I think it was special for many reasons because it was before the pandemic sort of grounded us, but also along with that panel and those 5 days that we had, the kind of interactions that we had, the kind of exchange that we had with like-minded individuals, and so many initiatives that took forth. So I think I have personally experienced that kind of an opportunity, and it ended with March 8th that we saw. I mean, Lisa was commentating on that game, and for me, having covered Indian cricket, women's cricket as well for a while, I think it was special. 80,000 plus at the MCG. It was emotional. It was just something different. So I think there was those were my experiences, and I've actually today when I sit in front of you guys addressing everybody, I truly believe a lot more can be achieved beyond the boundary when we have two countries who are committed to collaborate and contribute in each other's growth journey. And for me, that's what Australia, which I truly believe is the sporting capital of the world, at least for me, has forged to do with India over the years, through sports and through other streams as well. And like we mentioned about Neeraj Chopra, who won the gold medal, he had an Australian coach. We mentioned recently in the Olympics, the women's hockey team had an association of a women's coach. Even the Indian cricket team, be it Indian men's cricket team or women's cricket team, if it comes to sports science and technology, Australia always plays a role when it comes to rehabilitation of injuries of some of the athletes. So that connect is far deeper. And I think Australia and India continue to sort of build on that year on year. And the results for that are pretty path-breaking. The initiatives have not only helped teams, but also individuals sort of elevate their game and knowledge. And I would like to believe today when I sit in front of all of you as India's second female sports editor of a national TV channel, as I've been selected by the International Cricket Council to be amongst the 40 girls from 30 countries, I would like to believe learnings from all such initiatives and collaborations along with my body of work have played immense role in me reaching where I am. So that's why I am a true believer in sport diplomacy and what magic it can create. And I belong to a country where we've also seen, I mean, because of my experience in media and as a citizen, I've also had the experience of seeing what the other side of this coin is of sport diplomacy. And, we've tried that with our neighbors on numerous occasions, but the results have been different. In fact, two of my panelists, Simon and Lisa, would actually know how beyond the boundary the dynamics define, right? The on-field rivalry. I mean, Simon, I don't even want to get into the high-profile matches that you officiated between India and Pakistan, and Lisa has sort of experienced them just being around with the cricket circle. And that's why my submission sort of comes in again for support diplomacy to be a successful tool through different metrics that we see. We need to go beyond. We need two countries who are like-minded, committed to collaborate and contribute in each other's growth journey. And I think I sign off with a belief that sport diplomacy as a tool is yet to be maximized. It has immense potential to forge stronger, sustainable bonds between two nations, commercial, non-commercial, but just building communities together and connecting individuals together to elevate each other. And to all my fellow Indians in Australia who are attending this, wish you a very happy Independence Day. You might be away from India, but I'm sure a little India is always within all of y'all. And hope you always remember that you're representing our country. So that's a responsibility that you need to sort of be aware of. And thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists and interacting with the attendees. And if you're unable to take all the questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Harini Rana. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Harini. And that was the T20 World Cup was also where I met you last year, the delegation. So Absolutely. It was fantastic. It really seems like it was an eternity away, as I said before, but it was fantastic for him to form all these connections as well. So thank you for sharing your experiences, Harini. We'll come back to you later with some of the questions following up on that. Brad, would you like to go next?
Sure, Melina, no problem. I won't bore everyone with PowerPoint, but I thought just a couple of slides actually just put some context for those who don't know. So I work as a CEO for Melbourne City Football Club that competes in the A-League locally, domestically here in Australia. But we were actually acquired by the City Football Group, which is the chief brand there is Manchester City that competes in the English Premier League. They acquired us in 2010. And we've since been part of that group. And I wanted to show this as far as you to show this slide pictorially, just to show where we have offices around the world. And Simone, sorry, if you could go to the next slide, so you've got the controls. This is all our clubs around the world. So the first question we get asked, why do you have clubs around the world? What's the point? And I'll explain this briefly because it starts to tap into the whole sports diplomacy area. So this is more specifically, I guess, having clubs all around the world. There are lots of international relationships between obviously ourselves and Australia, but all those clubs around the world and with each other. But also we'll go to the pointy end down to our club actually in Mumbai. So which is something we'll talk more about. But the premise, the reason why City Football Group with the lead brand Manchester City many years ago, this would have been, I think it was 2008, 2009. And the global CEO, who's ex-CEO from Barcelona, comes from very strong football pedigree. He was always frustrated with a club like Barcelona that had millions of fans all around the world, but you couldn't really engage with those fans. So if you had lots of fans in Indonesia or China or India or those sorts of markets, the only way you could really engage was to be selling some merchandise in the local sports shop, or they would watch the content on broadcast or on streaming. So that was a bit of a frustration that we couldn't engage in those markets with a really, really strong fans and that were consuming the sport and consuming Manchester City. So the answer was that it'd be great to have a team competing in some of those key markets, competing domestically in those markets, and all come under the City Football Group umbrella. So that was what started back at that time. So the first club that was actually acquired. This was a startup. We entered the American football, the MLS, and they started a club right smack bang in New York City with New York City Football Club. They purchased a license and started a club from complete scratch, a true startup. And the next cab off the rank was actually in Melbourne. So the City Football Group, unbeknownst to us, watched us for a year to see how we did business and how we engaged with the community and how we ran our all sorts of parts of the business, not only on field, but our marketing, our governance, all those sorts of things. and ultimately they were happy with what they saw and made a bid to purchase us in 2010. And as I said, we've been owned by the City Football Group since then. And since then, it's been an incredible ride. You can see just by those clubs there, we actually have, Club Manchester, New York, Melbourne, Chengdu in China, Mumbai in India, Yokohama in Japan, Girona in Spain, Lommel in Belgium, Troyes in France, and Montevideo in Uruguay. So they're the clubs all part of the group. And if Simone, if you can flick to the next one, it's probably a more relevant one. So we acquired 65% of Mumbai, a club in Mumbai in 2019 in November, and acquired 65% of that. And the big question is why? Why do we do this? And the main reason is that Mumbai only had one team, and there's a population of 110 million, which are just crazy numbers, right? The numbers in India and China are incredible markets, even though we all know for a market like India, cricket is the overwhelming predominant sport. But the round ball game, football, the global game, is actually going through significant growth in India. So that's why the interest from the group. The question that we often get asked is, why would a club, how would it benefit Mumbai City from involvement with Manchester? And it really is to bring, global football expertise, sports science, access to, we have 60 scouts scattered around the world looking for young talent. And they're in South America, in different parts of Asia, all over the world looking for young talent. Marketing, digital, commercial expertise from the mothership in Manchester. So all those things come into play, and Mumbai had access to that sort of expertise, and very quickly that started to pay dividends. Last year we won the Indian Super League, and we're very successful, won every possible piece of silverware. Simone, just on the next slide, if you can, this is really compelling, and the question why City Football Group have chosen to invest in India. You look at the 650 million adults interested in Premier League, 227 million Manchester City followers. It's actually the largest market for Manchester City. 8 million TV audience in 2019-20, and football's on the rise. So it's really significant numbers there, and that gives a little bit of the background, I guess, is in why the investment in that market. So if you go to the next one, that'd be great. Thank you. And you can have a look here. We spoke about cricket as being the overwhelmingly most popular sport, but you can see football's is on the rise and has mass participation and interest from a football point of view. So then you have the other sports, tennis, badminton. I would have thought hockey was up there based on how they went in the Olympics as well. But so that's really, again, all these sorts of measurements and KPIs that were looked into make it a fairly compelling market to be in. Simone, if you go to the next one, thank you. So the main thing with our group, and it's the same in Manchester, it's the same in any one of those clubs, and it's the same here in Melbourne as well. The business is really three components. One is the elite side, so that's the pointy end, that's the performance, that's the finding young talent, developing young talent. It's medical, it's sports science, all those things which we all know about sport. That's one key pillar of our businesses. The second one is actually the running the business. So this is your marketing, this is your sponsorship, your membership base, producing content to get out to your fans, all those sorts of things. That's the revenue driver. So in simple terms, football costs us money to have elite teams. And it's this other part of the business which is funds it. So that's actually driving revenue from supporter base through sponsorships and all those traditional means. But the third part that people often don't know about, which is equally significant, is the purpose-driven organization component. So this is a massive part for the whole group. Certainly is here in Melbourne as well, but it's a third pillar for us, and it's all about empowering better lives through football. It's using football as a tool for social good, and we have we conduct an enormous number of programs, hundreds of programs each and every year here in Melbourne, as we do all around the world, to help in those areas. And it's basically broken down into 4 subsections: so equality and social inclusion, health and fitness, education, and environment. The next slide, if you can. So that's a little bit of a slide on that foundation, on the not-for-profit component. This is worth just mentioning a little bit more about it, but on that social inclusion component, we do all sorts of programs. So how we normally do it is we engage with local government, local councils, to find out if there's a pressing social need, where it's unemployment or at-risk young youth. We do programs for, often it might be new immigrants coming into the country, and use football as a pathway for assimilation, particularly if they're coming from countries, or geographies, Africa, Indonesia, those sorts of markets where football is their kind of the code they know, and we can actually use football as a way to get social inclusion, to meet other people, and to get started in Australia. So we have a whole team of people that run those sorts of programs, and it's through consultation with local councils to find out what are the needs and requirements, people at risk, marginalised, and it goes right from young kids, cradle to the grave, right through. We run programs called walking football for the elderly. And we have lots of old Italians and Greeks, for example, who grew up playing football, and their bodies don't allow them to run around a pitch anymore, but they do it's almost a slow motion walking football. They still get out and have some exercise. We have those sorts of programs. So I can't go into all those. Probably the one that sums it up the most, we have one called Young Leaders Program, and what that is we run programs for kids in at-risk areas, different communities. And for example, we've done a lot of work with African kids in the Dandenong region, where they go through our program and they become young leaders themselves. And what they end up doing with the qualifications we give them is they go back into their own communities and then start running those programs for youth in their own respective programs. And so it's us giving them the skills. And what it does, a lot of those programs, is really just getting the kids out to do structured learning, not only just football skills, but it's about health, fitness, purpose, those sorts of things. And we get incredible results from that. And that happens all around the world. So that's kind of the city and the community component. The next part, I'm not sure if there's another slide there, Simone. I did have that might be the last one, I think. I think it is. So more specifically, I guess, talking about the sports diplomacy and what's our involvement with the Indian community, which is what we're all here about today. We've had a long-standing association with the Indian community. We have 2 years ago, we actually hosted a Melbourne City match with a theme. It was a Diwali theme, and I think that's how Melina, I think you might have come across us in the first instance. We've always felt that it's incredibly important for us to not just appeal to the obvious football fan that are out there, but to make sure we try and engage with all sectors of the community. And we recognize that the Indian community is significant. It's huge. We understand cricket's the passion, but we also know, based on some of those slides I showed you earlier on, there's a growing interest in football in India, but also with Indians based here in Australia, who now living in Australia. I guess our biggest proof point in recent times to follow some of those markets that we'd like to delve further into. We're actually moving our whole operation. So for the last 11 years, we have had a relationship with La Trobe University based out at Bundoora in the north of Melbourne. And we've done lots of activity with different groups in that area, but we're actually in the process as we speak in moving to the southeast of Melbourne, based at Casey Fields and Cranbourne, but it's a joint venture between both Dandenong councils and Casey councils. And we recognise that that area is absolutely significant. It's been the fastest, the top 10 fastest growing areas for housing and growth over the last 10 years. we recognise that a market like Dandenong, for example, is the most multicultural city in all of Australia. And we know that it has a significant Indian community in the southeast as well. So that's going to be really important for us going forward. And it's a key reason why we're moving the club is to be immersed in that demographic. So with the high multiculturalism in those areas, that the round ball game is actually the #1 sport. And actually, it's rare to find it in Victoria, where AFL is not the predominant overarching #1 code. But in that market, football is a very, very strong sport. So it's actually #1. There's more playing fields with soccer goalposts than AFL goalposts in those areas. One of the things I was going to mention there is that it's always really important for us to, we want to try and also, we run all those community programs in those markets and those different nationalities and all those multicultural areas. But we're also always looking for talent as well. And often you find some hidden talent in those areas. We've always been very keen to look at bringing talent from overseas. And we have even had experience. We trialled a young Indian defender a few years ago, Gurumangi Singh. And when we trialled him, let me tell you that the Indian media went absolutely crazy. I've never been more inundated with inbound phone calls from local businesses wanting to see how they could sponsor. It was absolutely incredible. So we actually know what a profound effect it would have on our club in terms of interest from the Indian community if we actually managed to get a player from India to come and start in our A-League team. Something we've been keeping an eye on and certainly hopeful to do in the future. Certainly now that we have a team in Mumbai, will allow that to happen. The biggest barrier in the last 2 years has been obviously with COVID, so we haven't had the same freedom of getting players back and forward. But we do have players from Australia now going and playing in teams in India, in the Indian Super League. So there will be, over coming years, when we're the other side of COVID, a lot more movement between players from India and Australia moving backwards and forwards to play in the respective competitions. The diplomacy, we're a big believer in diplomacy through sporting events, which I think a lot of this is what it's about. We actually organised a tournament, City Football Group. We had our club plus our team from Spain, from the City Football Group. We actually played the Kerala Blasters in Kochi in 2018, and it was a pre-season type practice thing, but we played games over there. It was incredibly well received, great crowds, great enthusiasm. We look forward to doing more of those things in the future. We certainly plan to have our players from our team in Mumbai come across to play some exhibition games against us here in Melbourne, and vice versa. We certainly plan to have our team go across there as well. So, and we recognise that those vehicles, those events are just fantastic vehicles for all the ancillary things that Melina spoke about at the start of the presentation. All the other elements that you can weave into that, from business and trade, tourism, all those sorts of things as well. So we look forward to, like all of us, coming out the other side of COVID, so we can really get those programs off and underway. The final one I just wanted to touch on, I know I'm taking up too much time, but is the education piece. So we've been fortunate, as I said before, to be partnered with La Trobe University for the last 11 years. It's a partnership where we very much woven into the fabric of each other's businesses to a large degree. So we're in a situation, we have lots of master's students that have studied sports science, for example, end up doing programs with us, working with us for a year, and they actually are genuine benefit and help to us in terms of a particular type of research that helps our elite program. But we also have students that need to get some real life work experience, and they as part of their undergraduate course, they come and spend time with us. And we also have a volunteering program where we have a lot of students from La Trobe come and actually spend time, like on a match day, in the cut and thrust of a match day experience, and come in, on the weekends and help out and get that experience. But what we're finding over recent years, the student intake into those programs and those sports science, sports management courses has been an increasingly large number of international Indian students in those programs. and we've had quite a few Indian students come through and have experiences with us in those programs, which has been absolutely fantastic. So we continue to see that trend. So it's nice to know that you know, they're spending time in Australia, coming over and spending time getting their formal education here, but getting some fantastic real world practical experience with an elite sporting club, and then many of them taking that back to their home country to try and get jobs in those markets. That was probably a bit of a, just sorry about that, a whirlwind go through, but that's just a little bit about, I guess, how our club and our whole organization across the world is sort of involved with the sport diplomacy from obviously multiple countries, but India being a really, really important market for us.
Thanks, Brad. That was a very comprehensive overview of what the City Group does and fascinating work. And there's a few people who've asked in questions how they can support it and how they can be part of it. So maybe we can address that later. Maybe you can let them know in the chat box or whatever.
For sure, we'll do.
Yeah, I'll move on to Lisa. Lisa, would you like to please share your insights now? Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for including me. I have to blame Melanie Jones for dobbing me in because she wasn't, she's not in the country, she's over in England. It's her birthday a couple of days ago, so I think she got out of it very well. So look, the main thing is, I guess, sports diplomacy as an athlete. We don't focus on it. We're there just to play the game and to play it at the highest level. But as you get older and a little bit more experience, you start to see how sport can play a role. And it probably wasn't until I got involved and asked to be part of the Sports Advisory Council for the federal government, when we caught up with the Foreign Minister, Minister Payne, and we kind of asked, you know, what are her thoughts? Why does the federal government have something like this? And for her, it was pretty simple. As a female dealing with dignitaries, other foreign ministers, they tend to be all male. And what breaks down a negotiation sometimes is sport. Sometimes it's that commonality of talking about what happened in a cricket match, a football match, the Olympics. There is something there that just puts you at ease, which then allows the negotiations to take place. So she has always been an avid follower of all different types of sports, and she has found for her, in her work, that sports diplomacy has helped. The point of the Advisory Council was literally getting together a group of like-minded people involved in sport and different aspects of sport. So, for instance, Gavin Wanganeen from the Indigenous, a former AFL player, Anna Mears, obviously her experience of cycling over in Europe, my experience of India, and obviously we've got a really strong connection with the Pacific region as well, given that they're such close neighbours. And sport for all of us has broken down so many barriers to achieve so much more. So whilst the bushfires were taking place and we had great visions and hopes to achieve a lot of things, unfortunately, we haven't been able to because of the bushfires, and then the pandemic has hit. But certainly, you know, even through that discussion of people from all walks of life in that council, there are some really great opportunities that we can forge, especially in India. And to be honest, Australia has always probably looked to the US or China as the big two to kind of target. But I was putting my hand up going, we've got to be focusing surely more on India, and maybe because I'm biased, because I was born there, I've played a lot of cricket there, and I've spent a lot of time there. And I can just see India thriving completely. And the great thing is that we can learn so much from them. It's not just a one-way street, which is exciting. A couple of other opportunities that I've had along the way. We spoke about sports science, and I was part of, I was in Mumbai at the time when our Prime Minister at the time had come over to sign an MOU around education in sports, sports scientists, nutritionists, physios, all of that aspect, and using what we've had and what we've developed here in Australia to hopefully not only improve the skill level over in India, but also increase female participation within that industry, because it tends to be a male-dominated industry in India. So I got a chance to see how that worked for firsthand. And then the other thing is, when we were asked to be part of it, and when we kind of as a group were discussing sport diplomacy, I guess around the table, we were trying to think of what's something that stands out in our mind. And probably the easiest thing for me was Nelson Mandela and what he did with the rugby union side, and how they were trying to get rid of apartheid, and how big winning that World Cup did for South Africa, and the political views, and the vehicle was sport. So as I've gotten older and probably a little bit wiser and starting to mix with different groups, and I've come out of the athlete mode and I've seen the world as a bigger opportunity, I certainly see sport and our relationship between Australia and India. And it's an easy one for me, being cricket. So yes, football is growing, but cricket is still the lifeblood of both of our countries. And there are certainly a lot of opportunities to tackle. And I know the advisory council, once we get going, certainly India will be a target.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, cricket definitely is the main purpose. I mean, it is everything for India, but we're seeing that growth in other areas as well. But thanks for your insights, and I will come back to you with questions later. Over to you, Simon.
Lisa, once again, happy birthday. You're a great stand-in for Mel Jones, and it's always great to hear you talk on subjects like this. Melina, look, as a cricket umpire, we are diplomats anyway. And having officiated many India-Pakistan matches, it's not just a game of cricket, it's something a bit different. And I think for me as a cricket umpire, when you go out to represent not just the laws of the game, but also your state or your country or your colleagues, that intrinsically takes an element of diplomacy with you. You're forever trying to either separate the two teams who compete very passionately, or at least try and manage their interpretation of various components of the game to reach an agreed outcome and keep everybody happy, which is somewhat impossible. But we do enjoy the challenge. There's no doubt that sport is a unifier, which Lisa has touched on with the Mandela story. But sport transcends, for me, religion, race, politics, languages. It's a unifier. And it is that common element, it's that common thread within the culture of India and Australia that we passionately share. India and Australia cricket matches go way back more than 70 odd years. And it was only recently, a couple of years ago, that India won their first Border Gavaskar trophy on Australian soil. From what I understand, India was the first, it toured Australia initially after reaching independence in 1947. So there is that tremendous bond between the two countries, and we have this iconic Border Gavaskar series that was instituted back in 1996, that both countries play with such passion, enthusiasm, and a desire to win. So sport, for me, is that connector. It is that common thread, but it's also now a business. I think since we saw the Packer revolution in the mid-70s, we saw Lalit Modi take IPL into an element of, corporate dominance within sport. It reaches so many people at so many different levels that sport and business now is something that actually goes hand in hand. And I think, being a cricket umpire, not only are we an advocate for sport, but for me, I think it's really important that this is the opportunity, this is the leverager. This is where business can actually use sport, as Lisa was touching on, to start that conversation, to build that relationship using sport as that method of leveraging to go to that next level. And I think if we're talking about diplomacy, we can use a lot of our sporting stars, a lot of our sporting personalities within the corporate objective, if you like, to leverage off that commonality and actually start to explore new markets and new ways of doing business and sharing that common love that we have for sport.
Thanks, Simon. I was going to ask you about that, in fact, about this brand value that sports people have, and especially for Australian cricketing personalities. And you're one of those, and as is Lisa. I think even Australia's India Economic Strategy notes the credible celebrity status that our sports people have achieved in India, and how that has promoted positive images of Australia. So you are, how do you think sports people, maybe you can elaborate on that. How do you think sports people can use this positive imagery to contribute to further the relationship between Australia and India, especially the people to people links? Because I know you've been doing a lot of speaking in India, you've been even here, and you're connecting to a lot of Indians as well. So you're obviously building those bridges through the people to people ties. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, look, after probably over the last few years before COVID really had an impact, I think I did around maybe a dozen talks and presentations to various universities and colleges across the north, south, east and breadth of India, talking to young people about those benefits that sport brings. What have we learned along the way? What's worked, what hasn't? But more particularly, how do we empower the next generation through sport to reach their intended passion or goals? Because I think, you know, education and sport are ways for people to explore their potential and become better human beings. And I think when you can take those transitional, transferable skills from sport, put them into educational facilities and educational programs, it's a bit like what Brad was talking about before. You know, you're taking all those sorts of elements and actually empowering young people. And in your case, where you've been doing some work with the female and younger female populations, sport's tremendously empowering. Sport builds self-confidence. Sport builds teamwork. It builds language and cross-cultural skills that are basically life skills. And I love leveraging off that sporting connector and opening that conversation and getting people to think about, well, if he can do it or if she can do it, why can't I? And I think that's where we've been able to tap into cricket with our female game. We've tapped into now 51% of the population that traditionally we haven't done very well. And we've brought mums into the game. We've brought young girls into the game. And when you look at the stars of the female game, like Lisa we've got on this call, but you know, Elise Perry and the like, and they're seeing women actually grow and become stronger and more self-empowered. I think that's a great thing to do. So being able to share those sorts of stories and learnings and role model elements with, you know, younger people, I think is really the future.
Thanks, Simon. You certainly have been doing that. Lisa, I mean, both Australia and India are committed towards gender equality and female empowerment, and you just and with your new role, of course, with the on the advisory for diplomacy, I'm keen to understand where you think Australia can contribute towards development of female sport in India, not necessarily just athlete development, but also media training, umpiring, coaching, etc., and also generally in empowering women through sport. You spoke about cricket, and that's one way. Do you see other ways as well in which we can engage?
Yeah, I think when you look at sport as an industry, you've got your athletes on the field, but then you've got your administrators, your operators, your managers, and then you've got your broadcast media. It just encompasses so many different roles. One thing that has happened in the past, and I think it's with ABC, there is a journalist, they train a number of female journalists over in India that are involved in sport. And I've done a few interviews with them over the past. So we're fortunate enough in this country where probably our women's sport and our gender equality is going in the right direction. Just announced today was it, that AFLW will expand out to 18 teams. So the fact that, you know, we've got so many domestic competitions that can be seen for the first time. Before, it was always in the background on live streams. It was only the tragics that were able to find it, whereas now mainstream are able to look at it. So we've got some big events, and obviously the T20 World Cup that was played in 2020, there was a workshop and so many other panels and things that were happening. No doubt with the other world events that will be taking place here in this country, again, and especially women's events, it will open up the doors to potentially learn from each other. and to build that connection. But certainly the lessons and the reasons why Australian and women's sport in this country is thriving is because of certain pathways or programs or structures, and that can absolutely be shared. And that's you speak to, and I can only speak from a cricket point of view. We are more than happy, and I talk regularly to the Indian girls over there, but also even administrators within the BCCI, and questions are asked: how does it work here? How can it work there? So unfortunately, we can't just cut and paste and put it in and make it work in India. It has to kind of work for the nuances for each region as well, but there are certainly opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been talking to Cricket Victoria about taking their Leadership Women program for girls in schools here to India as well. Of course, it needs to be modified. As you said, you can't just take it here and put it there. We're working on trying to modify it to make it suitable for Indian audiences. So hopefully that might be another way of engaging. Harini, you've obviously benefited from some of the on engaging with India, with Australia, and you were part of the trade mission that came here as well during the T20 World Cup. And Lisa mentioned that as being a enormous tool in not only the sports diplomacy but female empowerment and bring about all those issues to the fore. And you've also done a similar thing with the US. You've been on a delegation to the US as well. I just want to get your thoughts on just about how can we enhance the engagement between countries through these missions, and what were the differences in the engagement between US and Australia? Because someone mentioned before that there's been a lot of more engagement. Lisa, I think, mentioned that when we talk about engaging from Australia, it's always with the US, and a lot of, even in India, there's been a lot of investment from the US and UK, less from Australia. So I just want to understand, did you see much difference and in that engagement, and where did you see the positive? Where did you see the connectors?
I think, Lisa mentioned appropriately in terms of, how Australia sort of looks at big two, which is China and US. But, from my experience of the two initiatives that I was involved with the US consulate compared to Australia, I still believe that Australia and India have far more common with regards to sport in terms of, just the cultural aspects as well. And for me, if I need to compare between the two, I think they're two different sort of completely, I don't think they are at the same level where I can compare. But if you look at the closeness to it, the proximity to it in terms of what I connected more with was Australia, because generally the common connects that we have, there are common areas that everybody connects on. And also in terms of just the whole environment, when, even as a journalist, when I've come and covered cricket in Australia, one of the experiences I would like to share is, I know it's not something to be proud about. You saw that ABC clip. I mean, I was featured in a newspaper only because I was the only female in that press contingent of India, which had about 50 plus male journalists who were covering it. Based on that story, actually, I got a call from the Prime Minister then, Julia Gillard. She was in the office, and I got a call from the Prime Minister's office saying that, ma'am would want to meet you. And after MCG, we were anyways going to the SCG. So we decided to go there, and I did meet her. Personally, at a level, it was a great experience to sort of, meet the Prime Minister, speak about, how the dynamics work in India and how different they are in Australia. But I mean, personal achievement, it was great, but I clearly didn't want India to be represented in such an image, right? Where, somebody is being called only because you're the only girl there. So I think just the whole delegate that I was there with the Global Business Summit, in terms of actually meeting and knowing that there is a ministry for women in sport, which is dedicated with individuals who are like-minded and focusing on sort of working on initiatives which actually have a greater impact. So I think that's phenomenal. And that's how I sort of think Australia, for me, comes at that level, which is far more connect. And that's why I would sort of always have been inclined towards the initiatives that have been taken by Australia. And I agree that, the templates have to be different, while the thought process and the intent is good. we need to figure a way out how it can be sort of customized to work in the Indian scenario, because, we've seen previously, we've had an Australian coach who came in to coach the Indian cricket team. While the methods were absolutely perfect, maybe the way it was executed didn't work too well. So I think it's important to sort of customize with the requirements of India. But I truly believe there is huge, immense potential. I'm not even getting into the trade and the commercial or non-commercial aspects, but just in terms of building communities and leading to some sort of a meaningful change, there is a lot that can be sort of developed and designed.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. I mean, the focus needs to be India and now. So I'm hoping for that. Moving back to you, Brad, you spoke about, you spoke a little bit about this, and we've just been speaking about the T20 Women's World Cup and these paid missions associated with these big mega events. Do you see your club or football generally facilitating that kind of engagement between India and Australia through, say, a big mega sporting event? AFL has played some games in China and had plans to do the same in India, but that didn't happen. But football seems to have more potential because it's a more popular game in India. FIFA, as you mentioned, FIFA's Women's Under-17 World Cup is meant to be in India next year, was meant to be the year before, but it's moved to in next year. So where do you see the potential?
Yeah, I mean, it's significant. I know for a fact that for the whole group at the highest levels, this is really important initiative for the group is to do these sorts of big events in India. As I mentioned before, we've done some smaller ones with a couple of our clubs in 2018 playing over there. But I know for a fact that they're keen to get the Manchester City first team doing games, playing games pre-season and so forth, some tournaments based in India, and to get other countries there. So that's the best way to catapult interest in a country, and also you mentioned before, when you have a World Cup in a country, it stimulates a whole lot of things. We're overjoyed the fact that we're having the Women's World Cup in football here in 2023, and we know what profound effect that'll have on interest in football from girls all over the country, and participation, but interest in our W League, and it opens up a whole world of people starting to ask questions about pathways and how can they work in football, if not be a player. There's so many ancillary benefits from those big events happening in a country. So we're well aware of those and recognise all the opportunities and benefits that come with it. And I think, as I was saying before, the data that's why I was so compelled to throw the slides up there in terms of showing the size of India, the size of the market, where football sits a long way off cricket, but it's still a significant sport that's growing. And certainly from our organisation, I want to throw everything at it to maximise every opportunity for engagement in India.
Thanks, Brad. Maybe the Women's World Cup in 2023 might be a good opportunity, a mega sporting event.
Exactly.
Not sure. That might be the one. We're running out of time. There's a couple of questions I wanted to ask more, but I don't think I have time to delve into those questions. But there are a few questions from the audience that I'll see if most of them have been answered. Someone says they're more. Someone saying, I want to create a grassroots sports startup between India and Australia, which consists of grassroots programs in cricket and swimming for young male and female athletes. Example, workshop exchanges and business opportunities for brands from both countries interested in grassroots. Can Simon, Lisa, and Molina guide me in this program? Maybe Lisa, Simon.
It sounds like a great business opportunity, doesn't it? But I think that sort of goes to the heart of what I understand about a lot of Indians, is that their tremendous entrepreneurial spirit that exists, and they're looking for ways to maximise those opportunities. I think what's really important when you talk about those sorts of aspects is that it's important to get support and direction from the governing bodies. I think it's important to move with them and to supplement what they're doing, not necessarily try to override them in any way. But having said that, I have some ongoing discussions with an entrepreneur in Sydney who wants to start up an academy relationship with India and Australia together, to not only bring players out from India and get them to assimilate into Australian conditions to benefit their cricketing career, but to also exchange the learning and cultural advantages of cross-pollination. So to come out and study in Australia and to also experience the culture here, and also reciprocally to get people to move from Australia into India. And anecdotally, I know Steve Law was looking at taking his son Austin across to Chennai to participate in an academy, a cricket academy in Chennai, to further his cricketing skills, but also to build on his life skills. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at there to make it economically and commercially viable.
Lisa, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the thing that I would probably add to it is my work when I was working with Rajasthan Royals and trying to grow women's cricket in Rajasthan was firstly finding out what the issues are and why isn't women's cricket growing in a region like that. And obviously there were some cultural barriers. But from a grassroots point of view, and the things that have worked so well in this country is that it's within our school system. It's a sport. You know, sport is played within school hours, so it transcends socioeconomic issues. The availability is there, the time is there. So, you know, what I was trying to do before I left was trying to get women's cricket, because men's or boys cricket is within the school system, but not women's cricket. So to try and grow cricket or swimming or any of those type of sports, the best way, I think, is to try and do a partnership with the local government and try and get it within the school system.
Thanks, Lisa. In fact, me and Simon were discussing this yesterday about the structure and governance of sport. And in Australia, we have that federated structure of sport with grassroots clubs that are affiliated to the state sporting association, and then you have the national sporting organizations on top. Whereas in India, we don't have similar structures, and the sporting initiatives are to a large extent ad hoc, and that gap seems to have been filled by corporates and the private sector with whether it's their corporate social responsibility initiatives or whether it's their for-profit ventures. So maybe there are some learnings from the Australian sports governance structures that can benefit India in the long run in increasing its capacity or high performance target and pathways. I'm involved with the sports academy, the advisory board that I sit on in Bihar, and we're looking to do some programs with Australia. So perhaps that's a path. Was it path that you can connect with me on that, and we can talk further.
Paulina, I just wanted to sort of add in
Harini,
to what
please.
Lisa mentioned with regards to, grassroots. So the good thing is, at least there are, as you mentioned, corporates are taking responsibility in terms of, be it part of CSR or something. So in fact, in Mumbai and some regions in Maharashtra, there is a program which is being launched by Mumbai Indians. It's called as Mumbai Indians Junior. And it's actually being conducted in association with these state associations, which are affiliated with BCCI, where they are actually doing under 16 girls cricket school tournament. So, at least there are certain initiatives that are taking way, but I know, like you mentioned, it's going to be a long drawn sort of dedicated pathway that needs to be sort of designed. But at least, we are getting some individuals who are getting their opportunity at school level to be trained and to play. So that's in the western region of Maharashtra, Mumbai, Pune, and Nagpur.
Thanks. I think we've run out of time. So there's no more question. There seems to be a comment there, which I'll quickly read out. Someone's written, Indian ecosystem needs some quality programs for sports analytics, umpiring, sports presenter that can be pursued independently. The millennials are ready to grab the opportunities and follow their passion, but we may need to provide them some ways to get on board. Current system in India is that you need to be in the system. It means you need to be a cricketer or associated with it to make a mark there. In simple terms, it is hard to be a Harsha Bhogle. So I don't have any comments on that, but yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose that is a fact, and there is difficulties in getting into the system without having those pathways and those clearly defined pathways and having that knowledge of what and where and how as well. I think maybe if we have a time, I'll just quickly ask a last question of everyone. Same question, and whoever wants to answer can answer that one. It's just about the COVID has created a slight setback in our sports diplomacy efforts. What do you think can be done during this time? I really see this as an opportunity to do the groundwork and to build the relationships. We are doing that through this panel right now. Simon, you've been doing a lot of online forums. Lisa, you were in India this year as well. How can we keep on effectively engaging during this time? Anyone?
Melina, it really is important to stay connected with people, whether it's Zoom, whether it's what we're doing today, whether it's facilitating discussion, but also picking up the phone and actually keeping those relationships and just touching base with people and making sure they're okay. And again, that common theme of health and being generally concerned about, how the other person or how the other parties are doing. COVID's been ravaging India. It's now causing massive disruption in Australia, but we need to sort of look beyond that. And I think that's what Brad was touching on as well, around we've got to start thinking about the post-COVID world. What does this look like, and how can we position ourselves to be ready for that and to take advantage of it?
Thanks, Simon. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I think what last thing is, I agree with you, Melina. It's a great opportunity to set the foundations before we're allowed to physically go and meet and catch up with people. So I think foundations are really the key to anything that you want to do and anything you want to achieve to be successful. So this is actually a really important time to ensure that your stakeholders are across things, that you have the right building blocks for you to then, once the borders open and we can travel again, to actually set things in motion. But it is an important time.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon and Lisa. And everyone, what a fantastic discussion this has been. Sports diplomacy is by no means an easy thing, and it also encompasses a lot of different concepts and actions. So for me, the empowerment route resonates the most for Australia's engagement strategy with India and sports. It, as others have mentioned, it aligns with our values and capabilities in the sports ecosystem. It may be the most likely way forward in the short run and would assist us in making meaningful contribution that goes to the heart of building a much broader and deeper relationship with India, built on people-to-people links. The humanitarian aspect of sports diplomacy becomes even more relevant to sports India's recovery after the devastating second wave, and the sporting endeavors may indeed provide that vehicle for many to recuperate, build social connections, and perhaps even find employment. And now is the time. And when we see India riding high on the wave of success at the Olympics and the commitment that it has now made towards a greater investment in sport. I would like to thank all our wonderful panelists who have spared time for this event and have shared their very valuable insights. I'm sure the audience enjoyed it as much as I did, and it has given us a lot to think about and a lot to do as well. I also want to thank Simone from the Australian Institute for helping us out, and also the Australian Institute for giving me the opportunity to host this event as part of the India Week. Thanks everyone for attending, and happy Indian Independence Day for everyone for 15th of August. Thank you.
Thanks, Melina. Thanks for having us, and
Thank
great
you.
initiative. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.